Imagine, for a moment, the vast and silent desert, where the wind whispers forgotten secrets, and every grain of sand seems to carry the memory of an ancient story. It is in this barren landscape that a brave and unexpected woman emerges, not as a supporting character, but as a central figure in one of the most dramatic narratives of the Bible. Her name is Zipporah. Who was this woman who, in a moment of desperation, took the knife of fate into her hands and saved the man chosen by God to free an entire people? Why is her story, filled with courage and mystery, so rarely told, even though it changed the course of sacred history? Zipporah was not merely the wife of Moses. She was a heroine in her own right. A woman who defied traditions, faced the unknown, and intervened in a life-or-death situation to protect her husband's divine mission. Her story is an invitation to look beyond the obvious, to dive into the nuances of a biblical account that pulses with lessons of faith, sacrifice, and courage. In this video, we will unravel Zipporah's crucial role, exploring not only her heroic actions, but also the historical and spiritual context that shaped her life. Get ready for a narrative that combines the suspense of a little-explored story with deep reflections on the impact of a single decision in the midst of the divine plan. Now, let's travel back in time and discover the cultural and historical environment that gave rise to this fascinating figure. To understand Zipporah, we need to transport ourselves to the time and place in which she lived. Imagine a land of arid mountains and shadowed valleys, where the skies seemed to touch the earth, and faith was shaped by the interaction with the wild nature. This was Midian, the home of Zipporah, a settlement surrounded by spiritual mysteries and ancient traditions. Zipporah was the daughter of Jethro, a priest of Midian, whose wisdom was known to many. Jethro was not an ordinary man. He was a spiritual leader, someone who understood the nuances of divine forces and sacred rituals. As the daughter of a priest, Zipporah grew up surrounded by values that combined reverence for the divine with pragmatism in dealing with the challenges of daily life. Her upbringing prepared her to face challenges that even she could not foresee. It was in this context that Moses, fleeing Egypt after committing an impulsive act of justice, arrived in Midian. He was a man marked by uncertainty, a fugitive without a homeland, without direction. Moses' encounter with Zipporah was not just a coincidence. At a well, a symbol of life and encounter in many biblical stories, Moses intervened to defend Jethro's daughters, including Zipporah, from hostile shepherds. This act of bravery, though simple, would mark the beginning of a relationship that would transform not only their lives but also the destiny of an entire people. Unlike many women of her time, Zipporah seemed to be shaped for the challenges that would come. Her marriage to Moses was not merely an alliance between two individuals, but a connection between two worlds, that of a Hebrew with a divine mission and that of a Midianite with deep roots in spirituality and inner strength. But what kind of dynamic would arise from this union? How would Zipporah, with her upbringing in Midian, influence Moses' life and become essential to his calling? Now, with this cultural and spiritual backdrop, we move on to the moment that sealed Zipporah's role as an unforgettable figure in the sacred narrative. It was a dark night, and the desert was in complete silence. Only the sound of the wind cutting through the dunes accompanied Moses and his family on their journey to Egypt. This was the beginning of a divine mission, a clear calling from God to free the Hebrew people from slavery. But suddenly, something extraordinary happened, something that could have ended Moses' story before it even began. The Bible describes a mysterious and dramatic episode. Along the way, the Lord met Moses and sought to kill him. This is a scene that defies logic and raises profound questions. Why would God, who had called Moses to such a grand mission, put his life in danger? And why would Zipporah, a woman who had been scarcely mentioned before, become the protagonist of this dramatic turn of events? The silence was broken by the realization that something was wrong. Moses was on the brink of death, and the weight of the situation fell upon Zipporah. In that moment, she displayed extraordinary courage and understanding. Instinctively, almost as if guided by a divine force, Zipporah took a sharp stone and circumcised her son. This act, seemingly brutal and incomprehensible at first glance, was more than a cultural tradition. It was a symbol of covenant with God, a sacred connection that, until that moment, Moses had not fully observed. It was as though Zipporah understood, in a flash of spiritual insight, that the omission of this rite had jeopardized her husband's divine mission. Imagine the tension of that moment. A woman, in the midst of the desert, with no prior preparation, facing the weight of a decision that would seal the fate of her family and, by extension, an entire nation. The physical and emotional pain of this act cannot be underestimated. However, it was her immediate and decisive action that restored the covenant between Moses and God. Zipporah's words after the act resonate as an echo of her deep understanding. "Surely, you are a bridegroom of blood to me." This enigmatic phrase reflects not only the intensity of the moment, but also the renewed bond between Moses, his family, and the covenant with God. What can we learn from this scene? Zipporah, in her apparent fragility, demonstrated a strength and faith that transcended her culture and the context in which she lived. She was not just a woman of courage. She was someone who understood the spiritual significance behind human actions. But this story also raises important questions. How did Zipporah acquire such sharp spiritual insight? Was it her upbringing as the daughter of Jethro, a priest, that gave her the tools to act in such a crucial moment? Or was it her time with Moses and exposure to the divine mission that prepared her for this task? In any case, Zipporah became more than a supporting character in Moses' story. She transformed into an example of how courageous decisions made in times of crisis can shape destinies. With this episode in mind, we move forward to explore the lasting impact of Zipporah and how her contribution shaped not only Moses' life, but also the history of the Hebrew people. After the defining moment in the desert, Zipporah and Moses' lives would never be the same. Zipporah's act of courage was an intervention that not only saved Moses, but also laid the foundation for the entire divine mission he was about to undertake. Zipporah's story, though silent in many ways, leaves a lasting impact that reverberates throughout the scriptures. But how can we understand Zipporah's lasting role in biblical history? First and foremost, she is not remembered merely as Moses' wife, but as someone who acted decisively in a moment of crisis. Her intervention not only prevented Moses from failing in his mission, but it also affirmed the importance of fulfilling the covenants with God, a central theme in biblical history. By performing the circumcision of her son, Zipporah ensured that God's covenant with the descendants of Abraham was honored, and ultimately, she made the liberation of the Israelites possible. However, Zipporah's impact goes beyond this single action. She was a woman of different cultures and traditions, navigating between the worlds of Midian and the Hebrews. It was in this unique position that she had the opportunity to influence Moses in ways that would not have been possible for someone outside his culture. Her role was crucial in shaping Moses as a spiritual leader and prophet. Without Zipporah, Moses' mission could have taken a different course, and the history of Israel might have been dramatically rewritten. According to Scripture, Zipporah did more than just be Moses' wife. She was the guardian of the sacred rite that Moses had not fulfilled, an action that reaffirmed the purity and integrity of the covenant with God. Zipporah's intervention served as a powerful reminder that obedience to divine commands goes beyond words. It requires action, commitment, and sacrifice. She was a woman who did not remain in the shadow of the great leader that her husband was, but who played an active, crucial, and strategic role in the divine mission. Zipporah's story also highlights an important theme: the relationship between individuals and the decisions they make at the right moment. How many times in our own lives do we face moments of crisis that demand courage and quick decision-making? Zipporah teaches us that we should never underestimate the power of our actions or the importance of our roles, regardless of our position or the context we live in. Her story is a lesson in courage, discernment, and unwavering faith, even when everything seems lost. Zipporah's impact, however, is not limited to this event. Her presence alongside Moses during the most critical stages of his journey, even with the quiet disappearance of her figure in later narratives, serves as a reminder that everyone plays a vital role in the grand divine plan. Her influence was crucial to the success of Moses' mission, and she remains one of the most powerful and spiritually relevant female figures in biblical history, even though her story was left in the background in the more well-known narratives. As we near the end of Zipporah's journey, we are reminded that her legacy is not measured only by the direct action she took, but also by the spiritual strength she represented, by the intercession she made at the right moment, and by the unwavering faith she maintained, even in the face of insurmountable challenges. Now, as we reflect on Zipporah's impact, we arrive at the conclusion of her story and the lessons we can take from it into our own lives. We have reached the end of Zipporah's journey, but her story, though brief in the scriptures, echoes through the centuries. Zipporah's legacy, as a woman of courage and wisdom, transcends the biblical narrative, leaving valuable lessons that still resonate in the lives of those who seek to understand the role of women in great spiritual stories and the importance of the choices we make at the right moment. Her intervention in the circumcision episode was not just a physical action, but a testimony of her faith and courage in a moment of great crisis when Moses' life was at risk. What can we learn from Zipporah? First, the importance of immediate action. In an era when we often procrastinate in the face of challenges, Zipporah teaches us that sometimes the most crucial decisions need to be made at the moment they arise. She didn't hesitate, wait for a clearer sign, or seek further confirmation. She acted with wisdom, understanding, and courage, which made her essential not only in Moses' life, but in the history of the entire people of Israel. Furthermore, Zipporah reminds us of the importance of fulfilling promises made to God. When Moses failed to complete the circumcision of his son, it was Zipporah who corrected the mistake, restoring her husband's covenant with the Lord. This action teaches us that fulfilling divine covenants is not something trivial. It demands commitment, and often, the sacrifice of our own desires or understandings. Her role also challenges us to reflect on how relationships within our own families shape our destiny. Moses, the leader who would liberate the people of Israel, was on the brink of death due to a failure to uphold a covenant. And it was Zipporah, his wife, who intervened. This makes us think about how decisions within the family environment can often be the catalyst for greater and deeper events. In our own homes, are we willing to take the necessary actions when spiritual challenges arise? Are we ready to fulfill our duties, even when it demands more of us than we expected? Zipporah, with her boldness and understanding, also reminds us that regardless of the role we play in history, we are all essential to the divine plan. Her presence alongside Moses was crucial, even when her figure was silenced in later narratives. She shows us that in a grand plan, even the less central figures have an eternal impact. In our own lives, what may seem like a small or insignificant action can indeed have great repercussions in the future. As we reflect on Zipporah, we understand that the role of women in biblical stories, often minimized, is in fact crucial. Zipporah's decisions shaped the future of a nation, and she was undoubtedly one of the most spiritually strong and influential women in the Bible. Her story deserves to be remembered and, above all, taught, for the lessons she left are timeless and applicable even today. Ultimately, Zipporah's story calls us to reflect on our own faith, our willingness to act when called upon, and our readiness to make a difference, no matter how silent or unknown we may be in the grand theater of life. Zipporah's legacy is not merely that of a wife, but that of a woman who, with her courage and wisdom, changed the course of history.